All right, well, welcome everyone. It is 10 o'clock, and this is Robin Donaldson with Indiana Youth Service Association. Welcome to our presentation today. We are fortunate to have Dorica Watson with us to facilitate this presentation. Before I do her introduction, I want to kind of go over a couple of housekeeping things. We will be recording this session, so if you are on and you are not automatically muted, I would ask that you mute yourself. If you're on the phone, I believe you can mute by hitting *6, and then you can hit that little microphone button if you're on and joining us online. Dorica will have opportunities to ask questions and ask for feedback. So when she does that, I just will remind you to unmute yourself. You can be talking away, but if you're not unmuted, we will not hear you. So just keep that in mind. And then if you are interested in getting a certificate of attendance for this, or we also have CEUs that are possible, then you will have to email me and I will put my email address in the chat box so that you have that information. If you're interested in CEUs, you will have to complete an evaluation that we will turn in to get your CEUs for that. But again, you'll just email me and we can follow that up with that after the end of this presentation. So I would like to introduce Dorica. Dorica Watson is the Community Engagement Manager for Second Harvest Food Bank. She directs the relationship-based poverty initiative circles that was started in Muncie over 11 years ago. It's probably a little bit longer than that now. Dorica is a change agent and is responsible for engaging the community and understanding the prevalence of poverty and efforts to move people from thriving to surviving. She is a certified Bridges Out of Poverty trainer and a certified trainer and coaches for Circles USA, now operating in 71 communities and 24 states across the U.S. and in Canada. She is credited for co-creating curriculums for understanding people in poverty training for middle-income individuals and employers, as well as a Youth 15-module financial empowerment and mindfulness curriculum. Dorica has served on numerous boards locally and in her spare time, volunteers with local youth and in her home church, the Church of the Living God. Dorica holds several certifications and has been the recipient of many awards, recently named the Social Worker of the Year in 2017, Regions 5 and Citizen of the Month for Delaware County, Indiana. Dorica holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in Social Work from Ball State University and has started her higher education career at Ivy Tech Community College. She is in the process of becoming a certified life coach. Dorica is the mother of 3 and is married to her wonderful husband, Eric. So with that, Dorica, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I will be honest with you. I have my picture up here today because you can't see me. I have done quite a few go-to meetings, but I'm using a different computer today and it doesn't have a camera. So I think it's important that you can connect the voice that you're hearing with a face. And so that is the face. My hair looks very different, but that is most definitely my face. I come from the school of thought that I speak about 45,000 words a day. I don't know if you all have ever looked into how many words an individual speaks a day. It ranges from 8 to 15,000 words. Again, I am about 45,000 words, and I am going to be talking to my computer. So it feels a little odd, just so that you know. I just want to make sure that I put that out there. I also want to say that I didn't realize that bio was from 2017. So many things have changed in that past 3 years. I apologize, Robin. I should have gotten you an updated bio, but it mentioned that I was Social Worker of the Year. That was my most recent acknowledgement. And I'll be real honest because I'm super proud of it. My most recent acknowledgement was I was the Athena International awardee. So that's pretty cool to me. I don't know if you know a lot about it, but it's pretty prestigious and I'm super excited about it. The things that you need to know before we move forward is while I work with families in poverty every single day, I am not a poverty expert. I strongly believe that the only expert in poverty is the person who is living in poverty every single day and gets up the next day to continue to press forward, to move towards thriving, to move towards long-term stability. So again, this will feel a little odd to me because I'm just talking and I'm not sure if I know how. Oh, I think I did. So I just opened the chat. So at any point that someone wants to ask a question, or there will be many times that I'd love for you to unmute yourself and answer the questions that I'm posing, let's just go ahead and work together there. Again, most of my trainings are interactive, so this is a little odd to me that I'm just looking at my face currently now on the computer screen, but we'll go ahead and get started. I think we will. All right, Robin, I was so excited to keep moving and it's not, oh, I think I have to do it from a different screen. There we go. So, today's training, understanding people in poverty by using an under-resourced lens. I think it's important when we begin to talk about poverty, we have to be willing to talk about poverty, not top down, but from an individual's perspective who is living poverty every single day. Now, I am a person who absolutely loves to travel. And so I think it's appropriate for me to put the passports here. Now, they don't belong to me, so that we're all clear. I have not been to all of these places, or nor do I need this many passports. I only have one. But when I think about travel, I think about an opportunity to experience. Travel for me is not a one-time event. It begins to be a process, an experience where I'm picking up things along the way. And if we're not careful, especially this is what my husband says, if we're not careful, my travel tends to look just like this. It turns into a particular event. And so I'd like to just really think about this picture in regards to training and also to understanding people in poverty. What I want us to be able to do today is to go through the process, to go through the process, to go through the experience, and not for us to pick up and drop baggage onto other people. I think that you'll have an aha moment about this as we go on, but ultimately what I'm telling you is that training is very much like travel. It's a process to get there, and it's not a one-time event. And so that's what I want us to remember, that this today is going to be about a process. I always like to identify a few tools that we might use during the training. So one of our particular tools we're going to use is Post-it notes. While you all may have your own ability to take notes there, I sure want you to take notes. There's an opportunity, there will be multiple opportunities for you to ask questions along the way, but you might find that you have an aha moment 15 or 20 minutes after we've talked about a topic. And so what I would love for you to do is to write a note so that we can make sure that we address all of those questions before we're finished with today's presentation. Another tool that we'll need today is an ink pen. Now, obviously the ink pen is very important for taking notes, and I hope that I share something today that you would desire to remember. So of course, using that ink pen is going to be important. Another tool, this tool is really important to me, and many of you may not have this at your desk or really close to where you're seated right now, but this mirror is the most important tool here, because as you look at this mirror, what I'm really telling you is that you are in competition with no one but yourself. And so everyone has a different vantage point in which they can hear today's training. And so if you have an aha moment or there's something that you desire to change, remember that's all about you. It's an individual process. And so I hope that I can guide you through the change process today. And then the last tool, it's not a tool that I have here today. I don't even know if you can see the tool. I hope you can. It's not showing up on my screen, but it's a virtual plunger. I think sometimes we are not willing to change our thoughts. And so that plunger is there just to help us, pull through some of that junk that may be stuck, that stinking thinking that we may be caught up in. And so we want to make sure that everyone is using these same tools. So we'll go ahead and get started. The training focus for today, there's 4 particular things I'm going to focus on. That this work is based on patterns, and all patterns have exceptions. There will be a time shortly that I will ask for a couple of people to participate, because I will focus heavily on stereotypes. But more than anything, this work is based on patterns, and all patterns have exceptions. The second one, an individual brings the rules in which he or she was raised. Knowing that we were all raised in different households, we have different experiences. Every time we enter an environment, we bring what we already know to the environment. And the thing about the rule being hidden is only the people that are a part of the group know the rule. Those who are on the outside of the group don't know the rule until it's introduced to them. We'll talk quite a bit about that. The third point, because it's easy for you, does not mean that the next person should be able to get it done too. Many of you have heard, if you don't work, you don't eat. And I pulled myself up by my bootstraps and I made it happen. So you've got to make it happen for yourself too. Or I was able to go to college and earn a degree, and now I can make, more money. You should be able to do it too. And what this training focuses on is, just because it was easy for you does not mean that the next person should be able to get it done too. And then the fourth and final focus point of this training is, for me, it's all about the why. It's about my personal why, and my personal why is to live each day with integrity, following my passion, being led by my faith, but also determining what your personal why is. Why do we want to make these changes? And again, this exists below awareness. It's super deep. So it takes a while to dig down and figure out what that why is. But those are the 4 points that we'll be focusing on. So as we get started, we want to begin by listening. Research tells us that people are more likely to change when we reverse the flow of communication. That is, when people are not talked at, but when they themselves have a chance or an opportunity to talk. So I really want to hear from you today. My hope is that we were going to start with this video, but I'm just going to kind of set the mood for you. I don't know if you've seen the video before. It's very short, just a little over a minute long, and it's titled, "It's Not About the Nail." And in this particular video, there is a couple on a couch, and they're talking about some experiences that the young lady is having. And the more she talks about her experiences, the gentleman who's talking to her on the couch just keeps reminding her that she has a nail in her head, and that her problems would be no more if she just removed the nail. And she continues to say, it's not about the nail. And she explains other things to him. And as she begins to describe, her head is hurting, her sweaters are snagged, she's having this throbbing feeling going throughout her body, he keeps reminding her that if she only took the nail out, then these problems would go away. And often that's how we are with families who are in poverty, with families who are under-resourced. We believe that they only make the change that we think they should make, their lives would be better, without understanding what type of additional barriers can be created from one simple change, or at least one thing that appears to be simple for us. And so I do apologize that we could not get the video to play, because I think that it really would have given a little more light to what we're saying today. Now, what I call this whole idea here is the writing reflex. Many people use this same term, so it's not an isolated term that I use, but everyone has a reflex. So if we see something wrong, we are prepared to fix it. And so with seeing that nail in someone's head, it's kind of like using your parent's finger. And you know how the parents wave that finger in front of you when you're doing something that they think you need to do differently? That's what that writing reflex is. While we don't always use that finger, it's sometimes in our language or in our belief that if people would just do what we think that they should do, their lives would be easier. And these things can be little changes. I'm being a little I'm thinking about this here, like things like hang up the dish towel, to big changes in life that can be made. So anything, there's lots of variants, but a lot of social service agencies, healthcare agencies, and other community organizations are focused on change. And so it's easy for us who don't need to make a change to say, this is the change that you need to make so that your life can be better. So I'm going to share something with you. You may have seen this before. It's called the Johari Window. With the Johari Window, we all have these exact same 4 window panes. We have our open self, the things that are known to us and known to others, and people don't have to know us well to know what our open selves are. We then have our blind self, the things that we don't know about us, but other people can pick those things up. We have our hidden self. Those are the things about us that we know and other people do not because we haven't shared it yet. And then there is the unknown self. And my grandmother always says is that you don't know what you don't know till you don't know it. And that's when you need to know it. Oh, okay, you can see that. Hope it's gone away. All right. I do apologize. I'm having thank you. I'm having all sorts of pop-ups today, so I'll try to get them off as soon as they pop up on the screen. So again, the unknown self is you don't know because you haven't done it yet. So there's no way to say that you won't do it. And again, I'll just say that one more time. You don't know what you don't know till you don't know it. Now, the thing about this particular Johari window, I think it's important for us to just take a moment and think about what would be, and I want you to put this into the chat box. If I said, what is your open self? Things about you that you know and other people know it too. What would be some suggestions? What could be an open self? All right, we're gonna go ahead. Yeah, your interest. Well, I will tell you, Robin, that your interest can be an open self. And also, Kelly, you mentioned that you're kind. Your kind can be an open self, but those also can be hidden selves if someone's not aware of what that is. Often when you're looking at your open self, you also can look at some of those things that people just know about you. It might be your race or ethnicity, absolutely. That could be your open self. You have a number of things that people just know, your gender, kids, grandkids, absolutely, if they know you. Kids or grandkids can also fall into the category of hidden self. But those things are important to know. The things that people know about you and you know about yourself with very little conversation or interaction. I want to go to the blind self. What might the blind self be? Now, understand that this is what other people know and you may not be aware. What might be a blind self? Let's go ahead and put that in the chat. And again, that is the thing that other people know about you, but you don't know, that you're sensitive. Absolutely. People may interact with you and realize that you are a little more sensitive than you realize that you are. So that can be a blind self. That also can be a hidden self. I think that it's funny. I love that. What is it? Bueller Family Resources. Yeah. Food stuck in your teeth. That's a huge one. Anything that someone else can visually see that you can't see. So that's absolutely one. Robin, you're right. How you come across to others. That's really important because that is your blind self. You're not aware unless someone shares it with you. So now let's look at your hidden self. Those are the things that you know about you, but others don't know unless you tell them. What could be examples of a hidden self? I think someone already put that up there, like you have kids or grandkids, absolutely. Family trauma, that's a huge hidden self. And sometimes that comes out and we are not sure where it comes from. Yeah, Robin, you're right. Fears, huge hidden self, because you may not have shared that with the person you're interacting with. Those are wonderful examples. And when we get to the unknown self, I've already mentioned, you don't know what you don't know till you don't know it. And most people would say, oh, I would never, and fill in the blank. But the reality is that maybe you haven't crossed that bridge just yet to do so. Now, when we think about the Johari window, there's something that causes the most discord. And it's the blind self, what other people see or know about you that you don't know. And then the hidden self, what you know about yourself, excuse me, that you haven't shared with others. And so today what I want to do is I just want to begin to open up those window panes, because I believe if we want to make systemic change, we have to be willing to address our blind self and to uncover our hidden self and also our blind self. So we're going to go ahead and get started with this particular thought. When we think about poverty, when we think about daily instability, when we think about ALICE, I don't know if you're familiar with the United Way term ALICE. So that's asset limited income constrained employed individuals who are working but maybe not making a living wage and have to make a decision between paying bills and taking care of some of their needs. That's ALICE, and that also can align with daily instability. That's what that person is going through every day. But I wanted for a moment focus on the stereotypes of poverty, and I want you to unmute yourself here. And so, what are some of the stereotypes that you hear about people in poverty? What do we say, or what do we hear rather? People in poverty are. Go ahead and unmute yourself. I want to hear a couple of voices.
Lazy.
People in poverty are lazy. They don't want to do anything. They would rather sit at home all day and allow my tax dollars to take care of them. What else have we heard? People in poverty are
not taking advantage of resources available to them.
absolutely. We have so many opportunities, and they want to sit at home and get a handout and not take advantage of what we have available. What else have you heard?
That they're stupid or uneducated. Oh, sorry.
I didn't quite understand you.
Uneducated.
Uneducated, and whenever you speak to uneducated people, you must talk down to them, because if they knew better, they would do better. What else have we heard? People in poverty are
On welfare.
on welfare, working the system, manipulating the system, going from one organization to the other, trying to get a handout. What else have we heard? People in poverty are surely we've heard something else. Now, again, this is not what we've said, what other people have said. What have we heard? People in poverty are so, okay, I'll go ahead. And I want you all to think about that. But the main reason why I'm asking you to share some of those stereotypes that you've heard is if we're not willing to say it, what we're really doing is repeating it. We want to be able to call a thing so that we can acknowledge the thoughts that we may have against those who are under-resourced. It's a lot, you know, when I think about that, you all said a lot of the ones I hear all the time. I hear that people in poverty have multiple children. People in poverty don't handle their resources well. People in poverty are African American, brown or Black people. I've heard a lot of things. People in poverty stink. People in poverty don't care. People in poverty don't try. I've heard a number of things. And I'll be real honest with you, unless we're willing to address that, what we have to realize is this may have been our experience, but this does not blanket individuals who are merely under-resourced. And I want to move forward. When I think about poverty, how would you define poverty? Not by the stereotypes, but how would you define poverty? You all, once again, can unmute and go ahead and throw something out there.
They don't have the basic needs.
All right. So basic needs are,
Unemployed.
want to add to that?
Unemployed.
Okay, so unemployed. Anything else?
A mindset instead of a financial status.
All right, so it's absolutely more than just money. Absolutely. Anything else someone wants to add to that?
Underemployed.
Underemployed, absolutely. One of the things that we talk about a lot in this work is the fastest way that someone can leave poverty is to increase their earned income, but it's the fastest way back in if they can't sustain it. So I think it's really important not only to identify poverty the way that we've just done, it's also to broaden what poverty really looks like. So the definition that I choose to use for poverty, daily instability, or ALICE, is that the extent to which an individual does without resources. Those resources can be financial, but they also can be a number of other things. They can be mental, emotional, physical, and in some instances, spiritual, knowledge of rules. There's a number of resources based on the model that we use that can contribute to poverty. And again, it's not just financial. I think about an individual that grew up in poverty and came out on the other side. This individual, a multimillionaire, kind of danced their way out of poverty. And once they got out of poverty, they were so excited to have money, but did not have the other resources intact. One of the resources that was missing was their mental resource. And what I mean by that is they weren't able to deal with daily life. They did not have the skill set in order to hire the right people to manage their money. And so they had a friend serve as an accountant. They were hiring every person they had ever met who had ever done something nice for them. And it's very difficult to hold that millionaire status if you don't have those other resources in place. So this person is no longer a millionaire because of that exact same thing. I have a more practical example. We had someone who had worked for General Motors for about 25 years. And this person had had a significant health crisis. And when that health crisis happened, there was the physical resource that was diminished. And so therefore, that person was in a physical poverty. One last example, we have someone who had made decent money, would be considered upper middle income, and had a significant occurrence in their life where they were depressed. And so their emotional resource was low. And when your emotional resource is low, you can resort to self-destructive behavior. So there's a number of ways that we go back to affirm that particular definition. So again, the extent to which an individual does without resources. All right. So one of the things that I hear a lot is, you know, poverty is really about making the right choice. If people would only make better choices, they would not be in poverty. And so as if there was this easy button that one could just go and hit. And I just want to make sure that we all know that there is no easy button. I also want to make sure, if I didn't say this already, that my trainings are always intended to be interactive. Because I want to make sure that people are not only understanding, but have an opportunity to participate. I can't imagine just sitting here for 2 hours just listening to me talk. So I want to do my absolute best to help create some imagery in what we're doing today. So one of the ways that we can eliminate some of the stinking thinking that would make one to believe that leaving poverty is all about making the right choice. I want to tell you a story, and I really like to tell stories. So I want to go ahead and get started. On this particular day, there was a lady who had custody of her grandchild, and it was a beautiful summer afternoon, nothing like what many of us are experiencing today with the weather, but a beautiful summer afternoon, and she was taking her grandson to the eye doctor. And she had arrived at the eye doctor, and she was surprised because the moment she walked in, they said, "You're in luck. We have a buy one, get one free deal." Now, I don't know about all of you, but anytime there's a buy one, get one free, I am excited to be a part of that. And so she said, "Well, I have 20/20 vision. I really don't need to be seen by the eye doctor. And they reminded her again, this won't cost you any money. It won't cause you to lose any time. You're already here with your grandson, and let us do this just for you. So she agreed to go ahead and do it. And so many of you, I'm sure, have been to the eye doctor before, so you know kind of what that experience is. So she sat in the first chair, she pressed her head on the bar, and the moment she pressed her head on the bar, poof, there was that air that automatically blows into your eyes. Not ever quite prepared for that air. And she wasn't prepared that day, so she had to do it again. And she did it again, and then she went to the second chair. And again, for those of you who are familiar with that process, there was a little clicker that they put in her hand and said, every time you see this orange ball, I want you to press the clicker. And so she put her head on the bar, and every time she saw the orange ball, she pressed the clicker. And then the person she was talking to said, you know what, you did a great job. We're going to take you back and we're going to go ahead and get you dilated. So she goes back to the room, and she is being dilated, and she's sitting there. And again, for those of you who have been through that process, you know that your eyes begin to get a little blurry. But her eyes weren't getting blurry, and she was concerned that the dilation either one, didn't work, or she was confirming that she was wasting her time because she did have 20/20 vision, which is the reason why she believed that her eyes were not beginning to be blurry. So when the eye doctor came in, he told her to go ahead and press her head on the bar and begin to read the smallest line that she could read. And she began to read those letters, and she read U, T, it's either an O or a C, H, R, 4. He said, great job. I'm going to turn it to the right. I want you to tell me if it's better or if it's worse. He said, it's better. He said, I'm going to turn it to the left. I want you to tell me if it's better, if it's worse. She said, it's better. He said, great job. Because you're doing such a great job, I only have to do this one more time. I want you to press your head on the bar and again, read for me the smallest letter that you can read. And she began to read that line. D, N, E, C, U, 6, I. He said, great job. I want you to tell me when I turn it to the right if it's better or if it's worse. And it was once again better. I'm going to turn it to the left. I want you to tell me if it's better or if it's worse. It was once again better. He said, I have really good news for you. And she said, I already know I have 20/20 vision. And he said, you're right. You have 20/20 vision. She said, I told you, doc, I really didn't need this exam. He said, well, you have 20/20 vision with bifocals and a trifocal insert. And she says, wait a minute, so are you telling me that I can't see? How could you tell me that I can't see? I drove myself here today. I parallel parked in the parking lot. There was a squirrel that ran behind my car and I didn't hit it. I got myself dressed and I think I'm looking pretty good. But you want to tell me that I don't have 20/20 vision? He says, yes, I'm telling you that the only way that you have 20/20 vision with bifocals and a trifocal insert. She said, once again, you have to help me make that make sense. He said that what's happened is that you've adjusted to the deficiency in which you see. I'm not telling you that you can't see, but I am saying that you've adjusted to a level of deficiency. And so you've been able to see out of your own lens, and everything that you've been able to see, you have affirmed that as being accurate. But what I want to tell you is once we adjust that deficiency, you will see colors that will be brighter than you've ever seen. You'll be able to take things that have not been in fine focus and really begin to put that into focus. And so what I hope for the rest of the time that we're together is that no matter what you have heard about individuals who are under-resourced, I want to begin to adjust the deficiency in which we all see. Taking that time to be able to see out of the lens of someone who may be under-resourced and not using just our own lens. Now, if you have any questions for me, feel free to put them in the chat, but I'll just kind of go full steam ahead from this point forward. So we want to look at the causes of poverty. And often when we look at the causes of poverty, the only thing that, that individuals think about is the behaviors of the individual, what someone did to cause their own poverty. Now, if you think about the causes of poverty, what would be an example of the behavior of the individual? You can go ahead and put that in the chat box. As a matter of fact, you can actually answer all the questions. I don't want to keep having you put things back in the chat box. So I want you to think about what would be examples of the behavior of the individual? What would be the examples of human and social capital, human exploitation, and public and economic structures that can cause poverty? Go ahead and take a little time right now and put that into the chat box. Absolutely, past trauma experiences, that would definitely be the behavior of the individual, but it also can be human and social capital, the lack of, and human exploitation. The same thing for drugs, that all can be the behavior of the individual, but it also can fall into the other categories as well. Thank you for those. Any more? The lack of modeling parents, absolutely. That's that human and social capital, once again, not having the people that you need. The institutional biases, again, absolutely, that can be in human exploitation and political and economic structures. Mental problems, absolutely, behavior of the individual. The way that someone was raised, once again, it can go back, it can actually fit in the top 3 categories. Yeah. Oh, history of making impulsive or poor choices. Absolutely. And it can go back to those 3 because there's always a deeper cause. Yeah, someone that just accepts the way things are, back to the behavior of the individual. But when you look at these causes, and feel free to keep adding things if you want to, but when you look at these causes, what the reason I'm showing you these is because I want us to begin to really think outside the box and not only blame the people who are poor for being poor. Sometimes we can do that without ever trying, but there are a lot of causes of the behavior of the individual that we didn't address. So some of those things could be crime, the breakup of families, spending habits, absolutely goes back to choices, dependence on the social service system. Yeah, someone believing that society made them this way, absolutely. That goes back to the behavior of the individual. When we look at the human and social capital, I'll just add a few more. The decline in social morality, that's a huge human and social capital. Social norms can go there as well. Adequate or not having the adequate skill set. When we look at human exploitation, some of the temporary work, something that does not allow families to begin to make a living wage. The cliff effect, drug trade in many instances, racism and discrimination. And I think someone said discrimination, I believe already. And then when we look at the political and economic structures, job loss, let's see, I thought someone put something else, the economic disparity. And then we can always put racism and discrimination in that category as well. So there's a lot of causes of poverty that I want to make sure that we're addressing. Today, I just want to chat about those, but it's really important for us to see, again, bigger than the behavior of the individual. There's a lot of different causes. So we'll talk briefly about mental models. Mental models are pictures that exist below awareness. Those are the things that come to mind when you say a particular word. Now, mental models also determine how we act, and they can interfere with our learning. Sometimes I look at the mental model and say, you know, based on my mental model, that can create a little bit of stinking thinking, because the way that I think, the way that I believe is the way that I believe it should be. And that may or may not be accurate. So we'll talk about these just a little bit. I have this old telephone here. And the reason I have this telephone here is I don't know the age range or the history of those who are on the on this call today, but I remember having this rotary dial-up phone when I was younger. And the thing about having that phone is I never knew who was on the other side. And so every time we answered it, I didn't know. It wasn't like when phones moved and then there was the caller ID bar where I could actually figure it out. But I'll tell you, I was preparing for a training. It had to be about 3 years ago. I was preparing for a training, and this organization had brought me in for the bringing me in rather for the training. And I had only talked to them via email and via phone. I had not had an opportunity to see them, nor had they had an opportunity to see me. And after the training was over, I had a lady that walked up to me and she said, "You speak great for a Dorica." And that sounds kind of rude if you understand where I'm going with that. And I thought, what in the world are you talking about? And what I realized, she and I were able to have dialogue. And actually, she and I are really good friends to this day. But she had never interacted with someone that had a name that she wasn't familiar with, that she could not assign to other people. And there was a level of respect for that person. And after she and I have been developing this relationship, what it reminds me of that old rotary telephone. When you're not able to connect with someone in any other way than just hearing them, your mind will develop pictures without your permission. So she had developed a picture about the way that this would be without ever interacting with me, because she was blocked, because that mental model interfered with her learning or her opportunity to openly listen to me. So I'm going to show you two pictures that I think all of you will be familiar with. So this first picture is of, it's a red box, and there's a gold arch in the middle, and there is a word written in white. Now, when you see that picture, there's something automatically that you think about when you see that. For some people, they'll say chicken nuggets. For someone else, they'll say French fries. For another person, they'll say fast food, easy to get to. Someone else may say unhealthy. But it doesn't matter what you say. We all have something to say when we see this picture. Why? Because it exists below awareness. We don't even have to think or process thought when we see that picture. Now, there's another shape there that it's actually red and it's moving. You all see that shape, and we're in the love month. So many people would say, oh, that's about love. But there's so many other things that can be associated with that red shape that's moving. Someone could say, oh, it's a heart. Others could say, this is what I need. Others might say, this is what I want. But nevertheless, there is a picture that comes to mind when you see those shapes. So again, you know that that's the McDonald's symbol. And in the other photo, there is the heart. And so those are the mental models. Now, is there something else that comes to mind when you see these pictures together? I want you to take the time in the chat. If there's something else that comes to mind when you see these pictures together, go ahead and add that into the chat. Oh, I'm loving it. Yeah. Well, looky there. Yes, you're loving it too. So John and Kelly are thinking along the same lines. Absolutely. Anyone else? Cholesterol. Yeah, that's something that people think about when you put those two together. Anything else? Lunch. Absolutely. And so the point of this is really looking at, we all will see something experience something, will feel something different. And our way, or what we see, is not wrong. It's our way. So when we talk about these patterns, understand that these patterns are developed based off of an experience. They are not happening just over in an isolated area. They come together based off of experience. And so I'm going to show you some more mental models. These are the mental models of poverty, that's at the bottom, middle income, that's on the right, and wealth, it's on the left. And when you have these mental models separately, what is really happening is that we have ships passing in the night because no one really understands the other. And I want to break them down for just a moment. We won't spend a lot of time here, but I want to break them down just a little bit so we can talk a little more about the particular mental models. Again, mental models are pictures. They're the first thing that you think of when you see a particular picture. So here is the mental model of poverty. And the red word in the middle is relationships. And so what you see is the words around relationship is kind of like what life is like now for people who are under-resourced, people who are in poverty. There's some entertainment, there's children, there's food, there's housing, there's illness, there's jobs and money, crime and safety, family and friends, and cars. Now, let's say for a moment, we were driving through a neighborhood that you would believe that individuals from generational poverty live there. So you have to use your imagination a little bit. I want you to get a mental model of a neighborhood in the United States. It could be in your city, but it could be in another, that you would say that people from generational poverty live there. All right. And now I want you to associate the words that you see on the screen with something that's happening. So let's look at the children. As you're driving through this neighborhood, what are the children doing? What do you notice about the children? Go ahead and take the time and write that into the chat. Okay, so no one's attending to the children, so they're unattended to. All right, very young and unsupervised. Anything else with the children? Not dressed well, their clothes are worn, they're running in the streets. Okay, lack of supervision. All right, tell me about the housing. Tell me about the housing in this particular neighborhood. Rundown housing, so it's dilapidated, many people living together, okay? A lot of rentals. All right, tell me about crime and safety in this neighborhood. So yes, there's lots of crime, very little safety. Okay, so moderate to high crime. Locking your doors really doesn't matter. Okay, someone can get in anyway. All right. So let's continue to drive through this neighborhood. Tell me about the food. What do you smell? What's being prepared there? Oh, I love that, John. The crime may be high, but neighbors look out for each other, okay? So again, you're driving through. There's some fried chicken. You don't smell any food. There's some more fried chicken, mashed potatoes and corn. Okay. Tell me about the jobs and the money in this particular neighborhood. Oh, fast food, okay. Low income. There's very little opportunity. High turnover. All right. So tell me, what in this neighborhood, what are people doing? Oh, not qualified for any jobs that could be available. All right. What are people doing for entertainment? Sitting outside, hanging out. Yeah, I call those porch parties. Drinking. Spend check on nails, movies, or out to eat. All right. All right. So when we're driving through this neighborhood, the land of very little opportunity, the land of high turnover, the land of oh goodness, it won't let me go up and see any of lots of hours for little pay. You know, we think about that emotional resource, and I see that that someone put drinking and spending their money on things that obviously are not going to help them get ahead. It's helping them get by from day to day. That happens when that resource is low, when that emotional resource is low. And just like that story of the lady taking her grandson to the eye doctor, is after a while you adjust to the deficiency in which you see. The neighborhood where you are, you begin to adjust to that deficiency. And I'm not saying that it's right, I'm saying that it happens. And not only someone being in this space, when you think about entertainment for me looks very different than everything that you all wrote down there. While I will say I do spend money on my nails and movies and out to eat, often what I do is I still have that access to entertainment because I can give myself a little grace, because I sometimes think, well, you know what, I worked hard for that. Because again, I use my lens to see how someone else should live their lives. Now, the thing about living here, even when we were talking about the stereotypes of poverty, is every time you make a move and your move doesn't align with someone else's move, or they don't believe that you're making the right choice, someone would say, oh, you're just, and again, one of those stereotypes of poverty. And after a while of being treated that way, or being told that you are some negative stereotype, you can begin to adjust to that deficiency too. And what it really creates is this big T or little t trauma. It has a lot of power. Obviously, the neighborhood that you were raised, the attitudes that exist there, it has a lot of power. And so what this looks like here is the tyranny of the moment. When people are faced with a lot of the things that you all have mentioned in the chat box, what that tyranny of the moment is the need to act overwhelms any willingness people have to think, to learn, or to change. This is how it's been. This is likely how it's always going to be. And so therefore, I'm just reacting. And when you're reacting, we all know that you're less powerful in that stance. You're also not able to look abstractly when you're reacting. And that's a very important point that we'll come back to shortly, but I just want to make sure that we're mentioning that. Now, when we look at the particular mental model of poverty, there's also the schools, the social service agencies, the police, and the churches that are there. And then obviously you see some of the businesses that in many trainings, some of the individuals have shared with me, these are the consistent businesses that happen to be in areas of low income. But why don't you use the text box or chat box, excuse me, and tell me what might the relationships be like with individuals who are under-resourced. What's their relationship like with the schools? What's their relationship like with social service agencies, with the police, and with the church? Let's use some space in the chat box to kind of answer those questions. Strained, absolutely. Lack of trust, yeah, from all of those people, yeah, those organizations. Anyone else? And if it's too much to look at all 4 agencies, just pick up one. Yeah, sometimes there's no relationship, and we know the importance of relationships. If the relationship is not there, then positive movement typically does not happen as well. Oh, disconnected. Absolutely true. Absolutely true. Anyone else? Any other thoughts about those particular relationships with those organizations that are there? Frustrated. And I think on both ends, I showed you the picture of the ships passing in the night. So if we have a different driving force, if we have a different thought process, if we have a different way of handling situations, there is a lot of frustration, and you operate just like ships passing in the night. Now, the one thing that I did not share with you, and I want to make sure that I share it. Oh, actually, intentional avoidance ticket. Oh, yeah, that's true. I think we see that a lot with the schools specifically, and then also the police. That is something that I hear a lot. We don't want to have any interaction with those two. So that's very true, very true. But the red word in the middle has a huge significance, and I need to let you know. That red word is relationships. Relationships and survival are the driving force for individuals who are under-resourced. What I mean by that is everything is dependent upon the relationships and survival. All decisions are made based on those two things. And I guess I can't have a blanket comment and just say all decisions. Again, these are patterns. All patterns have exceptions, but many decisions are based on relationships. How much I like you, how much I don't like you, how much I am connected to you, how disconnected I am with you, and survival. How bad do I need this right now? I want you to think too, if you look at the businesses, having businesses around your home, the pawn shop, the liquor store, the corner store, the rent-to-own, the laundromat, fast food, the check cashing places, the tent places, the used car lots, the dollar stores. How might that impact you if those are the businesses that are in your neighborhood? Those are the businesses that you are the closest to. How might that impact you? Go ahead and use the chat box for that, please. Again, what's the impact? What is the possible impact that having those particular businesses can have on your life? Absolutely, it influences your choices. Your money's gone pretty quickly. Absolutely. Absolutely. And to the point, John, with money being gone very quickly, if you think about having to go buy your groceries from the corner store and how much more expensive that would be than being able to have access to a grocery store. So when I think about many of these neighborhoods, they also exist in a food desert. So everything is more expensive. Bread, cheese, lunch meat, if that's your choice, a lot more expensive, and you don't have access to some of the fresh fruits and vegetables that you may need. And of course, it's a lot easier to just spend $3 at the fast food restaurant opposed to going to the corner store and spending $3 on a loaf of bread or a gallon of milk. So that's something we really want to think about. There is a natural impact that is happening when these are the businesses that you're closest to. And again, it goes back to how is that person able to see outside of that structure. Now, let's say that you were driving through this particular neighborhood and you realize that you just made a wrong turn. You turned into the wrong neighborhood. The neighborhood you were actually trying to turn into was this one here. This is the neighborhood of middle income, and the driving force here is work and achievement. Now, as soon as you get into this neighborhood, you are stopped by the police. Tell me, in this particular neighborhood, what that interaction could be like once you're stopped by the police. We're going to use the chat for that. You're in the neighborhood of middle income. This is the neighborhood you are most comfortable in, and you had just made a wrong turn and you're back to where your home neighborhood is. What's the interaction with the police once you're stopped in this neighborhood? It's respectful, absolutely. Absolutely. And there's a huge possibility that the police officer that just stopped you might even be someone you're connected to. You may know them. You may know them. They may be a part of the carpool group that helps take your kids to school, or maybe they're the coach for one of the kids' sporting events or something like that. Now, one of the things that we know as we're looking around this particular circle is that children in middle income are in 4.5 structured activities a week. That's very different from the circle that we just looked at in poverty. But this particular, this is really important because I don't mean that they're all pay to play. I just mean that they're structured activities. So it looks a little different, and I can break that down if I need to. So as we're driving around this neighborhood, it looks a little different. There's vacations, there's retirement, there's education, there's family and friends, there's clubs and civic groups, careers, prevention, housing and assets. Tell me about the vacations in this group. Tell me about the children. What are the children doing in this particular neighborhood? The kids are playing video games, all right? Oh, Fortnite. Once again, they're playing video games. They're riding bikes. And the chances of them riding bikes, it could be pretty high, especially if there's sidewalks. They're enjoying life. Life looks a little different. All right. Tell me about the housing in these particular neighborhoods, because it looks very, oh, they're doing well in school. The housing here looks a little different also. Tell me about the housing. Oh, they have their own bed in their own room, which is hugely important. So they have a time to de-stress. They have time to practice a little mindfulness to get away from everyone else. The space could be well kept so that the yards, the lawns can be well kept. Anything else about the housing? Single family housing. So there's possibly some home ownership there. Okay, most own and they don't rent. And in some instances, they can all look the same. Absolutely, absolutely. I also want you to see something different here. The word career is here. And when we were looking at that mental model of poverty, it was jobs, it wasn't career. And then when you look at vacations, vacations are here, but entertainment was there in the poverty. I want to go back for just a moment, if it's okay. And so when we look at entertainment, entertainment is a concrete thing that someone can do. And also the need for entertainment that can be driven by middle income vacations, the need for entertainment. What I realized for me in particular, I was driving the need for many of the families that I was engaging with to focus heavily on entertainment without intending to do that. So what I would do, I invited someone to my house, and this person who was under-resourced had come to my home, and this happens all the time. This is not an isolated event. But with this one particular person, they were able to share with me about that experience. So when they came to my house, we were having some cookout or something in our backyard, and they came in and they complimented the home, and we went on about, you know, what we were doing. Well, that following year, it was around this time, it was around tax time, and this person had told me that they had purchased two 50-inch big screen televisions. And all of the judgment I could muster started to come through. And my first question was, why did you just spend this money on this big screen television? And they began to tell me that they did it because they were moving towards long-term stability. And this was what people in middle income had. And they merely wanted to fit in. So what I remembered in that moment is this person had come to my home. And in my home, there were multiple really large televisions. And so this person used me as their relationship to signify what making it to middle income would look like. And so they did that by purchasing televisions because they thought that's what I expected them to do. And it was unfortunate. We had never verbally communicated any of those things, but that's exactly what they began to think about. And I started to really examine my own life. What was it that I was communicating to families who I really wanted to support and help them move towards long-term stability? And so it really caused me to do a lot of soul searching at that point. Now, I will tell you, there was nothing wrong with me having the televisions in my home, but I did realize that the teachable moment I missed. I didn't get to let them understand how that process really looked, because often when you're under-resourced, you're unable to think abstractly. Again, patterns have exceptions. You're thinking most concretely about what's happening right now. And she decided to solve her barrier between poverty and middle income by just grabbing a television, which goes back to entertainment. She also shared with me that if she had that television, that meant when she didn't have money, she could rent movies from Redbox. And that conversation went on and on. But I just wanted to make that connection where I may see entertainment one way, someone who is under-resourced that is focused on concrete issues may see it a completely different way. All right. Now, we're going to continue to drive, but in this particular neighborhood, we're not going to get in. This is a gated community, and the driving force here is connections. Not only the people who you know, but the individuals who know your name. That's important there. Again, we're talking about patterns, and all patterns have exceptions. Now, you will see there's just one or two similarities between middle income and wealth. And one of those things is vacation. That's on both sides. And I know as some of you look at this mental model, you may say, hey, I'm not in wealth, but I have charitable activities. I am traveling around the world. I sit on a board of directors, and that's true. And we know that's true because there's always exceptions to any patterns. But the only way, the point of showing you these three different mental models is the only way to prevent us from continuing to move like ships in the night is we have to understand that our driving force may not be the same as someone else's. So the driving force for someone in poverty may not be the same of someone that's in middle income. That may not be the same for someone that's in wealth. And it's really important to think about that. Also, keeping in mind that when we're working with families who are under-resourced, many of them, again, are focused on concrete realities, and there is some barrier to moving to abstract. And one of the things that can help eliminate those barriers is being in the moment and visual representations. The visual representation could help create the picture, and we'll talk about more mental models in just a moment, but can help create that picture or that mental model of what someone would like to accomplish. Even when we're working with people every day, I think it's so very important that we're using some version of mental models. When we're only using words to communicate our point, someone is not able to follow that, especially if they're a concrete thinker. If they only focus in the moment, it's much more difficult to visualize any concept. All right. I should say, I do apologize for this, but do we have any questions? Because I haven't asked if there's any questions, and I don't want to skim over something and someone's had a question. if you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself so that you can ask that question, or you can put it in the chat box, because it's very difficult talking to myself on the screen. I've had people walk by my office and they're looking in like, what's going on? So it's very difficult to just talk to a screen. So if you would like to share or have a question or a comment, this is a great time to do that. I'm going to skip a couple of these slides, and I want to go right to this outcome progression model. I want you to know that this outcome progression model was created by an organization in Atlanta, Georgia, called Hustle University. And I had an opportunity about 4 years ago to interact with the architects of Hustle University. And I thought I was creating some youth programming at the time, and thought, if there's a company that works directly with youth and their name is Hustle University, that means that I need to be in their presence so that kids do not hustle me. That sounds a little odd. Hopefully you catch it later, but that's what I began to think. And so when I went into their presentation, I was blown away. And I will probably never be the same after attending this presentation. And this particular outcome progression model is a very simple concept, but that's if we're willing to use it. So what it says is that everyone exists and lives their lives based on the teaching and upbringing. So whatever their teaching and upbringing is, that's how they live their lives. The teaching and the upbringing creates the belief system. And the belief systems cause us to have the decisions that we have. Ultimately, those decisions cause behaviors, and then those behaviors, there's always that natural consequence, which would be considered the outcome. Now, I like to tell stories, and I really hope that you're able to follow this particular story, because I'm going to tell it using this outcome progression model. When I was raised, we all were all raised in different households, in different environments. But where I was raised, I was taught that if someone hit you, hit them back. Now, I understand that that doesn't fly in most households, but in my household, that was okay. My teaching and upbringing was, if someone hit me, I should hit them back. My belief system was, if I did not hit them back when they hit me, that would give them permission, the green light to hit me again, to take advantage of me. So my decision was, if someone hits me, I'm going to hit them back. And I'm going to hit them so hard that they won't want to hit me again. And then we all can walk away hand in hand and be friends. So I grew up in an amazing neighborhood, but I grew up under-resourced. And I walked about 4.5 blocks to school every day, which is not very long at all. It's not a far walk. But when I was younger, especially in the winter, parents dressed their kids very differently than they dress them today when it was snowing or when it was really cold. So my mother chose to dress me in something that we referred to as moon boots. I don't know if you know about moon boots, but she dressed me in moon boots. She dressed me in a snowsuit that was like a jumpsuit. So it had the bottom with some suspenders, and then I had the jacket, the coat to go along with it, with a very heavy hat with a scarf and gloves. Now, again, this is not how current day children are being dressed in the middle of winter to go to school, but that's how my mother dressed me. So I was walking to school, and it was really hard to walk. If you can visualize with me for just a moment, just kind of a robot movement, that was about how fast I could walk as I was going to school. So I walked to school with my best friend. Her name is Shamika. And Shamika and I walked to school, and right when we got to about about a block from the school, about a block and a half from the school, there was a huge hill. And Shamika and I one of us would run on the top of the hill, and we would say, I am the king of the hill. And when you made it up to the top of the hill, you were important for the rest of the day. That was the only way that we could earn our importance in my neighborhood, is be able to be the first person to the top of the hill. Now, I'm not really sure why, but we never said queen of the hill. Both of us were female, but there was also not a lot of female empowerment at that time. So that could be why. I see this has popped back up, and I'm trying to get it off of here, Robin. There we go. Oh my gosh, another one. I apologize. Oh my goodness. Okay, I don't know how to get them off. I'm trying just to, okay, hopefully you can see the screen again. So again, there wasn't a lot of female empowerment. And so on this particular day, I am dressed in my heaviest, warmest winter gear, and I beat Shamika to the top of the hill. And I say, I am the king of the, and I don't get the word hill out because I am, oh, it says close chrome. All right, let's see. I don't know if I can do that without closing. Or I'll know for the next time. Thank you, John. I appreciate that because I have been trying to figure out how that can go away. So anyway, before I could get the word hill out, I was tumbling down to the bottom. And by the time I wiped the snow off my face, I looked up and my best friend Shamika was gone. Well, I made it to the school and I wasn't very happy, but I noticed that Shamika was standing right next to our principal. Our principal's name was Mr. Van Fleet. Now, the thing that you need to know before I tell you anything else about this story is that on Fridays, and this was a Friday, two things happened at my school. Mr. Van Fleet taught all of the students that on Friday we had to be extraordinary. So we didn't use the word extraordinary, but we knew the word extraordinary, and it had to be better than the rest. We had to stand out. So Mr. Van Fleet required that all students on Fridays wore collar shirts and dress bottoms. So it was a dress pair of slacks or a skirt or something like that. We could not dress down on Fridays because we had to be extraordinary. And then Fridays was the day that we had the famous French toast at my school. And I want you to know I loved French toast. So that's really important, right? So here we go. So I go in and I notice that Shamika is standing right next to Mr. Van Fleet. And so I walk over to Shamika and I slap her as hard as I possibly could. And Mr. Van Fleet screamed my name and he said, Miss Ross, which is my maiden name, Miss Ross. And I said, yes, sir. And he said, what did you just do? And I said, I slapped Shamika. And he said, go to my office. Now, Mr. Van Fleet knew me really well. And I was not going to his office until I got my French toast. So I went through the line, I got my French toast, and I went on down to his office. And just because a story told by me would not be a story without something to laugh at, when I got down to his office, his secretary, Mrs. Marlette, was sitting there. And she asked me what I was doing. I shared with her that Mr. Van Fleet needed me to come to his office. So I was requesting that she go down and purchase my extra French toast, because the only way that you could get a second French toast was that you had to eat your first one. And because I was not in the cafeteria on that morning, I could not pick up my extra French toast. So Mrs. Marlette went and picked up my French toast. And before she returned, Mr. Van Fleet made it to his office. And he said that he needed to call my mom, so she needed to be aware of what was happening. Just so that I can really set the stage for this conversation, when this occurred, paddling was also acceptable in the schools. So I knew that there was a possibility that Mr. Van Fleet was going to paddle me. So he called my mom, and my mom was very concerned that he was calling her. And her first question was, is she okay? He said yes, but I had had an altercation an unprovoked altercation at the school, and there would be some particular consequences that I would have to face in the school. Well, what those consequences happened to be is I spent the rest of the day in the office, and then I was unable to get popcorn after school on the Friday, because not only would we have legendary French toast, we also had amazing popcorn at the end of the day. Well, I have you to know that Mr. Van Fleet ran into me about 12 years ago, and he said, Derica, remember you had that engagement, that altercation with Shamika? Would you do it again? Would you hit her again? And I said, Mr. Van Fleet, I would hit her again. Now, I understand that hitting another person is not appropriate. I get that. But what I had to make Mr. Van Fleet understand is that my teaching and upbringing was very different than what was required at the school. Again, what I was taught was when someone hit me, I hit them back. And so when Shamika pushed me down that hill, I was obligated, based on my belief system, to hit her back. So it took no time for me to decide what I was going to do. My decision, of course, was then to go hit her. My behavior was actually hitting her right in front of the school principal, and his outcome was to punish me. Now, what I wanted Mr. Van Fleet to understand is that I didn't think he had done anything wrong, but I was troubled that he thought that I had. Now, again, I know that hitting someone else is wrong, but what I want you to understand, that Mr. Van Fleet did not talk to me about my teaching and upbringing, my belief system, or my decision. He talked to me about my behavior. And based on my behavior, he shared with me what the consequences would be, the outcome. But the reason I show you this today is that if you want to adjust the trajectory in the lives of families who are under-resourced, you must go below that red line. You can not only focus on why they're in front of you, which is their behaviors, and based on their behaviors, what you need to do. You must be willing to go down and begin to adjust or address the teaching, the upbringing, belief systems, and decisions. This is so very important if we want to make change. So again, when you go back to that easy button, if someone in poverty wants to have more, they want to accomplish their goals, all they need to do is hit that easy button. But as you can see, there is no easy button, because if this is the way that I was raised, these are the things that will always continue to come up. But a person who wants to make a change must be willing to change those things that keep them stuck. So I realized that if my response to Shamika today would be that I would hit her, that would keep me stuck. And it actually may land me in jail. So I want you to understand that, not from the my friend Shamika and myself perspective, but from understanding that if we want to make a change in people's lives, we have to better understand their teaching, upbringing, belief systems, and decisions. And not that we are going to change culture, because changing culture is nearly impossible. But what we can do is add an additional set of rules to someone's life, so that they are prepared to not only change and not only to erase that stinking thinking, but to begin to be able to thrive and no longer just survive. Keeping in mind that change is hard, and the need to act will always overwhelm any willingness people have to think, to learn, or to change. But keeping in mind that the healthier you are psychologically, or the less you may seem to need to change, the more you can change. That is so very important to remember, that change is not impossible, but it can be considered hard, because often the change that we want others to make, they're still in pre-contemplation. They're not even considering change yet. And when they begin to consider change, then you're looking at the contemplation. You're looking at and dealing with the identity. How will other people see you when you make that change? And how will you see yourself? And can you do it? That ambivalence. I think I can, but maybe not. I think I can, but maybe this is not something that I can be successful in. So remember, there is no easy button, because change is a process. Change is hard. And what we want to do is help our under-resourced friends, our under-resourced clients, our under-resourced participants understand that this is not just one easy button, which is looking at change concretely. You must look at change abstractly so that you can go through those stages. I won't break down all the stages of change, but I'm sure many of you are familiar with those stages. That pre-contemplation, not considering it, that contemplation, there is the possibility, it's now something that you can see and change may be needed, that preparation, actually putting together a plan and goals to make it happen, the action, actually doing it. And when you get to that action, it's really important that you are ready, aim, fire, and you're not firing ready, then you aim. I hope you understand the difference, because again, we want to make it abstract. We want to make those steps a part of someone's change. And then ultimately looking at the maintenance, making sure that we are continuing to move forward in that level of change, but always realizing that relapse can occur. So making a plan so that we don't relapse in that change. So that's a lot, and I hope that you all follow that. I'm sure that some of you are familiar with those stages of change, so I did not include it in this presentation, but I wanted to make sure that I mentioned it. So when we talk about change, when we talk about relationships being the driving force for individuals in poverty, one of the things that we have to be willing to look at is the 4 reasons why people leave poverty or people leave daily instability. Research says the #1 reason is it's too painful to stay. So you think about those realities that people face, and then you couple those with those stereotypes that we already talked about. People are dirty, they stink, they don't care, they want a handout. Some of those stereotypes with the real realities of poverty, not having enough, having more month at the end of your money, being treated poorly just because you don't have enough money. It's too painful to stay. The second reason that people leave poverty is a talent or a skill. Now, a talent or a skill can be tricky because I already mentioned to you that the fastest way out of poverty is to increase your earned income, but it's the fastest way back in if you can't sustain it. So if someone gets out of poverty because of a talent or a skill, being able to stay there is more of the battle. A vision or a goal, that's the third reason why research says that people leave poverty. And what you have to understand about the vision or a goal, again, that's abstract. And if someone is a concrete thinker, they may be unable to think abstractly or may be limited in their ability to think abstractly. And the fourth reason why research says that people leave poverty, but it's the #1 reason why they stay out, is a significant relationship. And I believe, and I think that Dr. Comer says it best, that no significant learning occurs without a significant relationship. That's very important. One of my favorite quotes is, human relationship is the sledgehammer that obliterates every societal difference. When we take the time to create a relationship with someone that's different from us, magic can happen. I believe that wholeheartedly. And the mantra that I stand on is that we're better together. We're better together, especially if we're willing to do life together. All right. So we're going to keep on moving. And if you have any questions, again, feel free to write your question in the chat or to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask that question. So we're going to move forward. In our training focus points, we talked about the hidden rules, and I call that playing by the rules. Now, it's very important to teach the rules. There are 3 primary sets of rules, but those rules are broken down into multiple sets because, again, the rules that you know, you bring to the table with you, and every group has its own set of rules. Now, the reason these rules are unspoken or they're hidden is because they're not written down so that everyone that walks in just knows them. Now, some rules you know that you've broken because there's automatically anger, judgment, and resentment. There's very little that you can do about that when that rule has been broken. And sometimes that rescuer triangle, I hope that you all can see the rescuer triangle on your screen On my screen, it looks like it's a little low. But those things happen automatically when a hidden rule is broken. Now, I want to explain to you, just with a little more detail, what a hidden rule is. Let's just say that you all are walking in a building today. You walked in a building and you held the door open for someone. And the moment you held the door open for them, they ran in the door, walked right by you, and didn't say a word. Write in the chat the first thing that comes to mind when that person does not acknowledge the fact that you held the door open for them. Let's take the time and write that in the chat right now. Rude, absolutely. That's judgment. What else? What comes to mind? Now, I am not convinced that no one has a reaction when that happens. Only myself and Tara. Entitled, absolutely. That's judgment. Absolutely. Those things are happening below awareness. You feel these immediately when someone breaks one of your hidden rules. It doesn't matter where you are, because one of the things that someone almost always says to me is, everyone knows that you should say thank you after someone holds the door open for you. But the reality is that there is no sign hanging over the door that says, when someone holds the door, say thank you. It's just the truth. We all have different rules. We all were raised with different rules, and we all interact in different groups, friend groups, social groups, employment groups that have their own set of rules. So the rules that are acceptable in one location may not be the rules that are acceptable in another. So when someone breaks your hidden rule, automatically anger, judgment, and resentment. Anyone else have any thoughts that may come to mind when someone breaks your hidden rule? Or if you have a hidden rule that has been broken, I'd love for you to unmute yourself and to share that rule or that scenario in which your rule was broken. All right. While you're thinking, I'll share one more thing with you, and it's one of my husband and I. We have a hidden rule. So my husband and I went to Chicago over the summer. I was a keynote at a conference there in Chicago, and we were there for 4 days. And the first 2 days we were there, I really didn't have time to get out and absolutely, they think they're above the law. I really didn't have time to get out and see the city much, and so he was out pretty much on his own seeing the city. And he did a lot of Ubering. He wasn't walking. And on the third day, he and I were walking together, and we walked miles. And he always says that I am Oprah. So if you know anything about Oprah Winfrey, you know her significant other is Stedman. So he always says that, you know, you're Oprah and I am Stedman. And so we're walking across a very busy intersection in Chicago, and people are just tooting their horns, blowing their horns. And my husband says, people know you everywhere. And it was the funniest thing ever, because he's looking at the crosswalk that says that we have the right of way, that we could walk. And he's looking at the light, and he sees that the light is red, so no one can pass by. But what I realized is that we were breaking rules in Chicago that we didn't even know we were breaking. While the light was red, while the crosswalk gave us the right of way, we were walking very slow, looking at sights, pointing, doing all of those things. And we were breaking the hidden rules of the city of Chicago. So people began to blow their horns at us. And of course, my husband, who can be a little naive, said, People know you everywhere. He really thought that people were blowing their horns just to say hello. And they were not. They were blowing their horns because they were angry. And again, keep in mind that whenever those hidden rules are broken, it brings out anger, judgment, and resentment. I'm going to take some time now and just show you a few hidden rules. I won't break all of them down, but I will talk about them briefly. So here are some hidden rules that we need to be aware of. The hidden rule with money. In poverty, money is to be used or to be spent. So often when people get money today, it can be gone tomorrow, because having that money on hand or having that money saved based on experiences, that money can be used against you. So money is to be used or to be spent. Not only can that money be used against you, you may not know the next time you're going to have money. So it's okay to go ahead and spend it to take care of everything you need in this day, which is one of the reasons that when some families, again, we're looking at patterns, all patterns have exceptions, receive their income tax check and they have money for about 3 weeks. And we sit back in middle income and say, wait a minute, you had $4,000 3 weeks ago and today you have nothing? The reason we can make that judgment is because it breaks our hidden rule, especially if our hidden rule is money is to be managed. And so that's very different. Again, we're ships passing in the night if we don't understand that. I'm going to keep moving. Destiny. In poverty, one might believe in fate. There's very little that you can do to mitigate chance. It's going to happen to me anyway. Why try? Again, that breaks a hidden rule in middle income, because someone in middle income might believe in choice. If you make good decisions now, it can impact your future. So make good decisions today. Now, I won't spend any time talking about wealth because that'll take me in a different direction, and we have less than 30 minutes. So I want to make sure that I get through everything. But if you have any questions about that, I will go back to it. So then we look at power. Power in poverty can be linked to having personal respect, the ability to fight. And again, you can't stop bad things from happening. In middle income, power and respect are separate, respond to position. And then there's power in information and institutions. So a really quick story about power. About 4 years ago, well, 3.5 years ago, I moved my office from a very small space, and my organization merged with a much larger organization, which is the Second Harvest Food Bank. Now, in my smaller office, I had an upstairs space in a church, and it was probably 600 square feet. So it wasn't a huge office space, but I did share the space with a few other people. Well, right next to the church, just literally maybe 10 feet from the church, was a McDonald's. And so I would go over to McDonald's every single day. And so when I would go over to McDonald's every single day, I had to have a root beer every morning, right? And so I'm going to tell you this brief story from the perspective of myself being Dorica in poverty. Now, keep in mind that this is not my own story. It's me giving you breaking down this power just a little bit more. So my name's Dorica, I'm in poverty, and I work at McDonald's. I get to McDonald's and I'm 5 minutes late to work. And when I walk in, my boss says, Dorica, you are 5 minutes late to work. Get to work right now. And I am still a little stressed because my car broke down this morning on my way to work. And it was raining, so I had to run 3 blocks to get here. And I was so pleased that I was only 5 minutes late. And not to mention, when I got into the parking lot, I saw an older couple who really needed some help because it was raining to get their food in their car. So I held the door open for them. And in spite of everything I had been through that morning, I felt really good because I was able to help that couple. I get in and my boss is yelling at me, tells me to get right to work. And as I start walking, obviously I'm not walking fast enough. So he yells, did you hear me? I can terminate you today if you don't want to be here. And I started thinking, you know what? I was looking for a job when I found this one. And you just disrespected me in front of my people. My people are my customers that come in every day. My people are also my coworkers. And so understand that power is linked to personal respect. So you just took my power from me. I could not prevent the fact that my car was going to break down. Now, yes, someone else may have realized that I only spent $500 on my car and I've never gotten an oil change in it. So that would have likely meant that my car was going to break down. But because I can't stop bad things from happening, and I may not be processing what needs to be done to take care of the vehicle, it feels like in the moment that these things are happening to me and I have no control. But the one thing I have control over is you will not continue speaking to me this way. So I might yell, I might get really loud, I might kick over a couple of chairs and say I quit. I might run up out of that place, or on a really bad day, I might just decide to let all of the ice out of the soda machine, because that's the type of day that I've had. So understanding power, it's linked to personal respect. Now here I am, Dorica, in middle income. Power and respect are separate. It responds to position. There is always power in information and institutions. So I go over on this particular day, Dorica in middle income, to McDonald's to get a root beer. Now, when I leave out of McDonald's, I see a young lady who's having a hard time. So I have a conversation with her and I help her solve the immediate crisis, get her connected to the right resources. And I walk into my office 5 minutes late for work. And my supervisor says, Dorica, you are 5 minutes late to work. And I begin to explain, this is why I'm late. I do apologize. I'll get right to work right now. So I sat down and my supervisor yells at me and says, I need you to come over here. I'm having a problem with my computer. So I go over there and I help her and I go back and sit down, knowing that I have to prepare for a huge event at noon today. So I go back over, she yells and she needs me to come back, and I come and help her again. And before I know it, she's really taking advantage of my time and she knows what I have to do. And then she tells me that I need to cancel my noon event because she needs me to drive and present to a group of investors for her. And I'm thinking, there is no way. She then yells at me and tells me that if I don't get it done, we could lose all of our funding, so I have to make it happen. So what I realize is that I keep saying yes to her every time she asks. The reason that I do it is that power and respect are separate. She may be disrespecting me, but she has the power. And not only that, in middle income, you would never quit a job before you had another one. So that's something that to be mindful of as well, is that I must have this particular position until I get another one. And the last point that I want to make about that is that I may not be able to tell her how I feel, but that doesn't mean that I don't express that to someone else. I may go over and text my husband and say, you know what? I am so tired of this place. The next opportunity that I get to take another job, I'm going to take it. But I won't say that out loud and not to that person. Why? Because power and respect are separate. Now keep in mind that these are patterns and all patterns have exceptions, but power is really important because one might feel either you have it or you don't. And in reality, everyone has power. It's the way that you view power is differently. If you're in middle income, you're in wealth, or if you are under-resourced and in poverty. We're going to keep going. Education, and this is higher education. So education is valued in poverty, but it's also abstract. And remember, one of the questions that are often being asked is, how does a 2-year degree, how does a 4-year degree, how does an 18-month certificate pay my gas bill at the end of the week? How does it put food on the table? So there often has to be a correlation between education, higher education, and what the end goal would be, turning that into something that's very concrete. And middle income, education is crucial for climbing that success ladder. So if you don't have education, chances are you're stuck. And we want to make sure that, remember, when we talked about destiny, that education is what you need today so that you can have what you need tomorrow. We're going to keep moving, and we're going to talk about language. Again, if you have a question or a thought, please place it in the chat. With language, poverty is about the casual register. That language is about survival. Remember, we already said that the driving force is relationships. And so if the language is about survival, there is a possibility that you're using very limited words, and there could be a lot of nonverbals. And middle income, it's the formal register. And this language is about negotiation. So it's very different. I will tell you that if you only speak one register, you're stuck. It doesn't matter if it's the casual register. It doesn't matter if it's the formal register. Again, a very brief story. About 4 years ago in the state of Louisiana, there was a case that went all the way up to the Louisiana Supreme Court. And there was a gentleman who was accused of a heinous act against a female. And the police felt like they had the right person, and they were interrogating him for hours, and I mean hours. I think it was right around 15, 16 hours. And so the gentleman said, "Get me a lawyer, dog." And they continued to interrogate him. "Dog, get me a lawyer, dog." And I hope you understand what I'm saying. Get me a lawyer, dog. And after this gentleman, for being in there for hours, he confessed. "I did it. This is how it went down. I am guilty." And so once his lawyer was involved, the lawyer said that it was a coerced, confession, and they tried to get the confession thrown out. And so every single judge that they went in front of did not overturn the case. And what they found out is that the gentleman never asked for a lawyer. He asked for a dog that was dressed up in a suit that would represent him in court. And in the state of Louisiana, they do not allow animals to represent individuals in court. Now, some of you are thinking that story is super odd, and there is no way that someone did not understand that that gentleman was requesting a lawyer. Well, what I want to tell you is that is on the it's in the law of the state of Louisiana. And unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, you must ask for a lawyer directly. You cannot put another word before or after the request, because it then diminishes the actual request. So he could not ask for a lawyer, dog. So my point again is, if you speak the casual register or if you speak the formal register, if you're unable to speak both of them, then you're stuck. In this particular work, we consider that being bilingual, being able to speak both the casual and the formal register. All right. So we'll talk just briefly about the casual register. That is limited words, so there's not a lot of words, and intent is often perceived because nonverbals are, you're aware of what those nonverbals are. Also, there's some discourse patterns. When you speak the casual register, it tends to be a circular discourse pattern. When you speak the formal register, it's a formal discourse pattern. So what I mean by that, very easy to understand. Formal register. Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Jack fell down and broke his crown, and Jill came tumbling after. That is the formal register. There was a very clear beginning, a middle, and an end of that story. That same story told in the casual register sounds very differently. Do you know Jack and Jill? Yeah, Jack fell. He hurt himself, but he's okay. But Jill fell with him, and she fell on top of him, so she's really okay. She didn't even get a scratch at all on her. They wanted to get some water, but I'm not really sure why they had a pail. They should have just had a bucket, and that's probably why they tumbled down the hill. But you do know Jack and Jill, right? Now, the thing about that story is typically the casual story is more exciting. There's more runs, there's more words in that story, but it doesn't have a very clear beginning, middle, and end. And often when we're interacting with individuals who may have or may use this casual discourse pattern, we have to understand that the story structure may be different. So we have to go back and rephrase some of the words, or reframe, excuse me, some of the words or the actual story. So are you saying that Jack and Jill both fell down the hill? Yes, sometimes that's important. And then if you're able to take that back, that casual story, and model it in the formal format, it helps the families for the next time. So if that story is coming to you, being able to take the words that your client or your participant use and be able to use it in the formal register so that everyone has a better access to both the formal and the casual register. All right, so we're going to skip that slide. So as we're nearing the end of this presentation, I want to tell you that for me, I think it's always important to focus on mindfulness. There's a lot that I've shared today, and being that I've shared it and you can't see my face, that kind of breaks down the relationship a little bit. And because we're not in the same space, that once again breaks down the relationship. I want you to look at this as mindfulness. And I don't know who practices it, but I do all the time. I love to practice mindfulness. And the difference here is, you either have a mind full of stuff, or you're mindful that you could really focus on the subject matter at hand. And what I'm going to ask is that over the time that we're together, the rest of our time together here, and also after this call ends, that you take some time and focus on mindfulness. What we talked about today, that you may be able to apply to different situations. I'll put my contact information in the chat. So if you have a question later or an aha moment that happens after we're together, that you can reach out and I can explain in a little more detail if I need to. But the one thing I want to focus on with this particular mindfulness exercise is I like to do something that I refer to as BBET. And we don't have time to do BBET here, but what I realize is that when your ship's passing in the night, when you are not understanding the language or the rules that families that are in poverty are living by, or the way, again, that they're speaking, the language that they're using, I think it's always important to practice some mindfulness technique, because it may not be, it may be honestly that the person is stuck. They're stuck in that casual way, and they're unable to interpret or understand or communicate in that formal way. So one of the things that I use is BBET. And BBET is a mindful technique that really looks at your breath, your body, your emotions, and your thoughts. Now, if you think about, for a moment, I'm going to just give a reference to an Avenger, the Incredible Hulk. If you think about what David Banner says, he says, "You won't like me if I'm angry. You don't want me to get angry." I think that BBET, if he would have known how to do it, he would have never changed into the Incredible Hulk. The reason I believe that is because BBET is an opportunity to have an internal temperature check. Because if your internal temperature is a little too high, then we have to do a little work before we move forward. I'll do this really quickly, and I realize that it won't give you the opportunity to really experience BBT in the light that it should be done. But whenever you're in that heightened state of awareness, you or those that you're interacting with, this is a really easy and phenomenal exercise that you can practice. I always encourage you to take a deep breath in and let it out. The deep breath is so important because you want to be able to control your breath. If you can control your breath and you can minimize the shallow breathing, then you can open up your brain to be prepared to process information. We think about those traumas, those big T traumas and those little T traumas. If we are able to breathe through, we can actually put those things in the categories that they need to go into. That's another training, another conversation, but I just wanted to bring that out. So again, controlling your breath, taking very deep breaths in, holding them, and then letting them out. The second B is your body. Sometimes the way we're standing or the way we're sitting or our shoes or our clothing is causing us to be uncomfortable. And when that happens, we can be triggered very easily, and we associate that trigger to something else when it's really our body. So again, when you're taking those deep breaths, you really can do that self-assessment. How is your body? What's going on? Is there something that you need to adjust? Is there something that you need to address? That's really important. The third letter of BBET is emotions. Those things that you're feeling. Are you really anxious about doing something? Or are you really sad and nervous about something? Or are you really excited because you're about to get an opportunity of a lifetime? Knowing where your emotions are can help you through this process. And then the last letter of BBET is your thoughts. What are you thinking? And if you continue to take your deep breaths in, what you're able to do is to own that thought. And then if it's a negative thought or if it's not helping you in the moment, you're able to push that out. Yeah, I love that, Robin. I follow Dr. Perry, and I completely agree that breathing is that remote control. It is. That remote control is so very important. And I will tell you, I am really good friends with a oh gosh, I can't even think of her actual title, but she's a birthing coach, and she talks a lot about and some of us who are familiar with that process know this as well, but she talks about the power of your breath. And if you can control your breathing, you can control everything that's happening in your life in the moment. And I firmly believe that, and pain being one of those things. So I do side with Dr. Perry on that particular thing. So remember, BBET is very important. And I can also put another link so that you can practice that if you like it. So as we're moving towards the end, I want you to understand that we want to make sure that we're able to create relationships with people who are under-resourced. One of those ways that we can do that is we can seek first to understand, because one of the withdrawals is seeking first to be understood. That's so very important. Another thing is clarifying expectations. When I said that there is often a disconnect, or there can be a disconnect between concrete and abstract, sometimes expectations, when they're written or when they're communicated, someone cannot create that mental model, that mental picture. So being able to clarify expectations are really important so that you can help a concrete thinker see concretely. Also, apologies are important, and definitely being open to feedback is important as well. Those are all deposits. And you see the other side, those withdrawals. Also, just a little more about creating relationships is using that adult voice when you're communicating with other adults who happen to be under-resourced. Just because someone is under-resourced doesn't mean that every decision that they've ever made has been a poor decision. It could be one poor decision that could cause a number of bad outcomes, or that could adjust the trajectory of one's life. So making sure that we're making those deposits into someone's life, assisting with goal setting, again, that's helping someone to see things more concretely. Identifying options related to available resources. So not just being a community that is resource rich, but systems poor. Like we have all of the resources for people in poverty, but we don't have viable systems in place for those individuals to access those resources. And what I mean by that is, we have a great parenting class, but it happens to be in a place that there is no bus line. And when the families get there, we don't provide childcare for this particular training. All right. So the last thing, not this, is the now what. Oops, you can't hear it. Here we go. So what we always want you to do is to identify your own hidden rules, to be honest about the biases and stereotypes that you feel about people who are under-resourced. Making more deposits than withdrawals, remembering that we all have that Johari window. We all have our open self, we all have our blind self, our hidden self, and that unknown self is yet to be written. So you have the opportunity to do that. BBET, practicing your mindfulness. And for me, I think always seeking the why. Remember that change is hard. The need to act overwhelms any willingness people have to think, to learn, or to change. And the healthier you are psychologically, or the less you may seem to need to change, the more you can change, which always goes back to it's easier for me to see that you need to make a change because I don't need to make it. My last slide for you today, and thank you as well. My last slide for you is the second mile. I think it's probably the most powerful slide because it commands that we do something more. We must all go the second mile. When we go the first mile, we simply do what is required of us. It is when we go the second mile that excellence is achieved and minor miracles happen. I appreciate you all today so very much. And doing this training today is truly going the second mile. I completely agree. Robin just said there are generational hidden rules too. Absolutely. There's those rules of poverty, middle income, and wealth. And my point earlier was those rules can be broken down as well. I think to your point, Robin, with the generational rules, I heard a story a while ago about why someone uses this particular pan to cook a ham and they throw half of the ham away. Sounds crazy, but the story is a lady went and purchased a full ham. She paid $75 for it. She cut it in half and threw half of it away, put the other half in the oven. Someone came in and saw the ham in the oven and said, why did you throw that half away? And she said, I don't know. That's what my mother did. She went and talked to her mother and said, you know, your daughter threw half of her ham away. And she told me that you do that too. Can you tell me why? And she said, yeah, that's what my mother did. So they finally went to her grandmother and they said, Grandma, please tell us why you threw that other half away. We know that that's the way it's supposed to be done. And Grandma said, no, silly. The reason that happened is because I didn't have a pan big enough to make the whole ham. And so you're right, Robin, when we look at those generational hidden rules, it's important to understand them because it's harder to change those because we always do what we've always done, thinking that we'll get a different result. And the reality is that's just the tyranny of the moment. The need to act overwhelms any willingness people have to think, to learn, or to change. Thank you all so very much for participating in this. My contact information is here on the screen, and I also can make sure that in the notes section that I put my email address so that if you would like to follow up or if you have questions, you can reach out to me directly. All right. Our time here is over, but I can answer a couple of questions. I see a couple of comments. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Again, if there's anything that I can do, if I can answer a question, I will. You can either ask now or you can shoot me an email and I'll definitely take time to do that for you.
Well, Johari, thank you so much. This was a wonderful webinar, and I hope that everyone found something that just really resonated with them and can take with them. I know that there were a couple of things for me, so I really appreciate it. And just remind people to email me. I put my email in there as well. If you need a CEU or certificate of attendance, emails will be best because that way I won't forget about it. But thanks so much, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. Thank you, Johari.
Thank you.